Well, it's certainly an invitation. This business of renunciation that we've been talking about, and of course, for the month, and of course, primarily, it's renunciation is involved in our daily life practice, our interface with the world, our behavior, and our habitual patterns. Some of which are wholesome and some of which are not as wholesome, and beginning to do more inquiry into that, a little bit more reflection, a little bit more contemplation, what's working and what isn't working for us so well. Are there some moves that we can make in the direction of wholesomeness, in our lives? Not because, again, somebody else says so, but because we've identified the pattern within ourselves. It may have been around for a long time. One of the patterns, and one of the emphases that we have in all of these paramis is how are they relevant out here, and how are they relevant really in here on the cushion inwardly. And one of the patterns that most of us experience, I would suggest that all of us experience in some way, is negative self-talk. And we have mentioned this before. We mentioned this negative self-talk when we talk about right speech and right inner speech. We mention negative self-talk when we focus on self-compassion or inner compassion and the lack thereof. And we mention it here in terms of the paramis, in terms of renunciation. What does it mean to renounce negative inner self-talk? We mention this whenever we can, in whatever context we can dharmically, because it's such a powerfully negative influence in our lives. That is to say, we ourselves offer much in the way of negativity in the way that we hold ourselves or don't hold ourselves. In the ways that we don't hold ourselves as worthy, as good enough. And that's one of the inquiries that the Buddha recommended that we all engage in. How are we speaking to ourselves? How are we speaking to ourselves? What is that inner patter that goes on? Not necessarily in dramatic ways, but in low-grade chronic ways. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, I can't believe I did that again. Oh, what's wrong with me? Oh, that kind of pattern. Oh, I'll do better tomorrow. Oh, should I apologize? Oh, what was I thinking? Those little comments that can just slide in without our recognizing them. Maybe we recognize them just a little bit, but if we don't bring awareness to them, then we're identified with them. Then we are subtly reinforcing that pattern. We are reinforcing that self-assessment, that negative self-assessment. I think most of us reinforce that negative self-reassessment many times every day, just in little ways. I can't believe I forgot that again. Oh, you dummy. I used to say that to myself, you dummy. What's up with that? Yeah. So part of what, as I understand this, the renouncing of negative self-talk there are a couple of moves involved in it. The first one is noticing it. We can't do much unless we're mindful of that moment of just the little arrow of self-judgment, the little arrow of the little not enough arrow. I call it the not enough arrow that we send our way. But first of all, I have to be aware. Oh, look what I just said to myself. There it is again. when we observe it, it changes it a little bit, right? Yeah, it changes it a little bit. We have to be able to notice it. And not identify with it, basically not believe it. See that it's something that's floating by, that's a little bit held me hostage throughout my life. It's the pattern. It's the devil I know. It's one of those patterns that I know well, but I'm not taking it on to limit that, to reduce that, to not believe it, to simply not believe it. If I could have a really terrible thought about myself right now, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. I'm just going to have that thought right now, a terrible thought about myself. Okay. Oh, that was really a bad one. I'm not even going to tell you what it was. But if I don't believe it, it doesn't gain any traction at all. In fact, if I don't believe it, it's creating a new pattern of not believing the negative pattern, the negative self-talk. And no, it won't matter a lot, but if I do it 1,000 times, it will matter. So many of these things, these moves in meditation are like this. No, you're right. Just having one moment of saying, I don't believe it, is not going to be transformative in and of itself. But if I make it a new pattern, if I say, no, I'm going to begin to notice that. I would like you to notice how many times in this one day you can notice yourself sliding into a little moment of self-judgment. If it becomes one of those moments that is worthy of noticing, because it's the beginning of turning around that habit, they will begin to add up. They will begin to add up. For Susan and I, we've replaced, oh, you dummy. Oh, you forgot again. Oh, we do two things with it. We notice it when it happens, and then we'll say either to ourselves or to each other, you've heard us say this, you're still a good person, or I'm still a good person. Now that may seem childlike and even a little silly, but it's not. Because over these years and over having practiced, this is what we've practiced this for quite a while. Those little moments are not happening so often. When they are happening, we go, wow, really? I don't believe that. I'm still a good person. I just dropped the ball for a moment. Yeah, I misplaced something again, I'm misplacing. I have these crazy little, do any of you have these little crazy little reading glasses that you can buy at like every CVS or every Target or every, since I had this eye surgery, to read, I used to be able to read this, I can't read this anymore unless I have unless I hold it up like this or I have my little glasses. Well, I've misplaced my glasses again for the third time this morning. Yeah, right? Yeah. So when I used to do something like that, I'd go, oh man, just a little bit. Oh, come on. What's wrong with you? No big deal. Just what's wrong with you? But if you say what's wrong with you 100 times a day, that has its own life. That has its own, I'm just not quite enough. I don't quite have it together enough, And if I go, whoops, hey, buddy, well, okay, I guess you're going to have to find a standard place to put those crazy glasses so you don't, maybe you won't forget them as much if you do that, but you're still a good person. If I say that 100 times a day or 1,000 times a week, essentially, it starts to create a different lightness, a different kind of relationship to myself. Yeah. And so it's a simple encouragement. All of these are simple encouragements. around things that we're doing that might slightly fly under the radar, and that we don't notice, But in one way or another, we've all become familiar with the little messages that we send ourselves, that we're not quite enough, or we should have it more together, that we shouldn't have done this, should have done this, should, as opposed to, okay, let's lighten up a little bit. Let's lighten up. And so this is a way, renouncing negative self-talk. Renouncing negative self-talk means recognizing it, not believing it, and often replacing it with something like, hey, you're still okay. Oh, hey, you're not a bad person. You're still a good person. For me, that's what I do that many times a day now. Many times a day. Yeah, many times a day. Notice it. Wow. I almost missed that one. I almost missed that little arrow. I don't miss them so much anymore, because I realize that the way to begin to replace them, to uproot them, to begin to replace them, is to notice, not believe, and replace. Notice it, not believe it, and replace it with a nice little moment. Just simple, like, wow, okay, no problem. Okay? Yeah. So that's an example of renouncing something, more of a mental pattern. Yeah. I call it the not enough pattern. Yeah. Yeah. Renouncing that, Yeah, as best you can. Yeah, for your own welfare.